was free education before the NATO troops started bombing. Free housing, free health care. But that was a society to be destroyed. Thank you, Brother Aramon. Our next speaker we have with us this evening is Sister Nellie Bailey. Sister Bailey is well known, first of all, throughout the housing activist campaigns in Harlem. As president founder of the Harlem Tenants Union, she has fought to keep people in their apartments, to get low-income housing, to get people, prevent the unlawful evictions, and it has been a long and hard fight. If that were all that she did, we would be applauding her, but that's nowhere near all of it. From her participating in the 1995 Women's Conference in Beijing, to participating in the Black Women's Studies Institute in Eastern Europe in 1999, to being one of the witnesses, being one of the monitors at the first free elections of South Africa, to traveling and receiving the Bannerman Fellowship, the Union Square Award for Grassroots Activism. There's a whole lot of work that this sister has been doing for a great many years. There are people who don't know her name who have a place to live now because of some of the work that she's done. There are people who are able to get the truth through her broadcasts on radio and television. They may not know her personally, but the work that she does, the guests that she brings to the microphone, the research that she brings to her audience uplifts us all. She's a recipient of many, many awards, New York City Council proclamation, the 2008 Conquest Awards. A lot of different groups have come together to acclaim and applaud the work that she does. Her perspective is not just local. Sister Bailey understands that what we do here and the fight that we fight here is watched by a whole lot of people, especially some of our brothers and sisters in Africa. So from Turkey to South Africa, Sister Bailey has been a voice for us, giving us information, a voice to us, teaching and uplifting us. Ladies and gentlemen, Sister Nellie Bailey.
Thank you very much to Owen and Kareem for giving me this opportunity and honor to speak to this audience, and to all of the members of the Circle of Brothers, and to you, most importantly, the audience here tonight. I thought I would have an introduction of a basic 101 on Africa that I find few people are aware of, and this is very brief. Of the 7 continents on Earth, Africa is the second largest, next to Asia, which is the first. The continent of Africa covers 11,700,000 square miles and is bounded by the Atlantic Ocean on the west, the Indian Ocean on the east, the Mediterranean Sea on the north, and the Red Sea on the northeast. There are 53 countries on the continent, totaling a population of 1 billion. There are, an estimate, 21,000 to 3,000 different languages that are spoken natively in Africa. For 2 centuries, from 1801 to the present, the U.S. military has colonized, occupied, that of humanitarian intervention, an obscene pretext that uses the United Nations and NATO as proxies for the U.S. and its European allies to wage resource wars throughout Africa. For the American right, left, and die-hard black supporters of Obama to buy into this script straight out of Foggy Bottom, the U.S. State Department, reveals a psychosis of race politics that Obama has successfully tapped into, regardless of whatever anti-democratic and warmongering waged through the world against people of color, including here in the United States. NATO's aggression in Libya had the support of Nigeria, South Africa, and Gabon, who voted for the bogus no-fly zone in the United Nations Security Council. The long-waged U.S. war against Somalia was sanctioned by the International Authority on Development in Africa, comprised of Ethiopia, the puppet government in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, Kenya, Uganda, the de facto French and U.S. military protectorate, Djibouti, and the United Nations cooperation to oust the regime of the Ivory Coast that Milton just talked about. It was also supported by the 16-member economic community of West African states, including Cape Verde, the Ivory Coast, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mali, Nigeria, Senegal, and Sierra Leone, and Togo. Since 2008, AFRICOM has staged a huge military exercise called African Endeavor, which trains American militaries to use standard communication practices. African armies have taught U.S. command and control procedures on U.S.-made equipment that is serviced by U.S. advisors. In 2009, the militaries of 25 African nations took part in this exercise. This year, 40 nations joined Operation Africa Endeavors, accounting for the vast bulk of the continent's men under arms. AFRICOM shares a huge annual military exercise called African Endeavor, which again trains military personnel to use standard communication purposes. More insidiously through AFRICOM, soldier-to-soldier doctrine, U.S. and African military have a peer command chain, I find this fascinating, that is intended to bond a one-on-one relationship up and down the levels of command to forge personal relationships with African armed forces over the long haul, regardless of what regime is in power. The AFRICOM orbit will be subject to attacks against those outside of that orbit, and Eritrea, an adversary of Ethiopia, being one of those countries. What entity in Africa is in position to resist? Will it be the compromised and humiliated African Union? No sooner than the fall of Libya, Obama sent 100 special forces to Uganda for later assignment to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the new nation of South Sudan, and the Central African Republic, the French neo-colonial outpost where the Americans sent Haitian President Jean Bertrand Aristide after kidnapping him in 2004. AFRICOM is only a handy tool of U.S. imperialism regime change to install and support puppet regimes, when in fact what Africa needs in order to survive, is a collective defense against imperialism, to develop the military capability to defend the continent's interests, to not trust Obama, the brown-faced of which has its own imperialist ambitions in Africa. China learned a bitter lesson from the NATO-led U.S. invasion of Libya. Chinese companies that serves as proxies for the government of China had an estimated $20 billion investments in projects underway in Libya. In fact, China had courted Muammar Gaddafi for many years. NATO targeted bombings paved the way for the rogue rebels to overwhelm Gaddafi forces. As a result, 36,000 Chinese engineers, tradesmen, and technicians fled the country. It was a major win for the U.S. to turn the tide against China's growing influence in Africa. Chinese infrastructure projects and its involvement in Libya's oil sector was destroyed. Although the debate continues on whether China posed major threats or opportunities for the continent, increasingly the view of the continent is that China is the lesser of the two evils when compared to U.S. military operations of shock and awe, genocidal chaos to bring nation states to their knees to protect U.S. strategic interests and hegemony on the continent. China's trade with Africa dramatically increased from $11 billion in 2000 to $56 billion in 2006, making it the continent's third largest trade partner behind the United States and France. In fact, China is becoming the most assertive investor nation on the African continent. More than 800 Chinese state-supported enterprise or activists are active on African soil, while Angola has now become China's largest supplier of oil. Chinese firms have already invested more than $6 billion in Africa in 900 projects, primarily, of course, in the oil sector, although it represents only 3% of China's overseas investment. However, the potential for future growth is tremendous. In 2006 through 2007, President Hung Jintu visited 17 African states, more than any other head of state in the world. In November 2006, an African summit was held in Beijing. It was the largest diplomatic gathering ever in China. China has diplomatic relations with 48 of Africa's 53 states, with the exception of Gabon, Mali, and Swaziland, Togo, and others. China has also pledged to double aid and credit to Africa. That's not what the U.S. does. It has already granted government scholarships to about 20,000 people from 50 African countries and sent some 16,000 medical professionals from 47 African countries.
We will have to elucidate the rest of it in the Q&A, hopefully.
Okay, can I just make my last point here? Okay, let's see here. I was going to talk about Africa's investment in Zimbabwe. And let me finish up with this. I wanted to also talk about what rape as a weapon of war against women. We know that some of it is propaganda, but we also know that the Congo is the rape capital of the world. We have to take that with some degree of research from the American press, because this is used as a demonization of the African continent to further its image of Africa as barbaric. But
African leaders who have not visited 17 countries on the African continent.
Absolutely, that was part of my comment.
There's a reason for that. And the geopolitics that Sister Bailey talks about, we have to understand, people talk about China taking jobs, but there's a lot of other things happening on the subtext that we should be aware of, why there's $50 billion in investment or 50,000 workers in North Africa from the Chinese continent. So thank you again, Sister Bailey.